As a gamer, have you ever been so bored that you just decided to take a stab in the dark and try something new? This happens to be one of those cases. On a whim, one day while strolling through the local GameStop, I saw a game based on one of my favorite film franchises of all time. After a quick scan on my cell phone for the game's stats, I paid my $40 and picked it up. Here are my observations. This is Mad Marty, and this is a casual gamer's review to Mad Max on the PS4 on Mad Respect TV. Again, I've been a fan of this franchise ever since I was a little kid. Mad Max even had an influence on my present YouTube identity. It seems only right to do a review on the game. Released in 2015 by Warner Bros. Interactive, Mad Max cuts right into the action from the moment you hit the start button on the title screen. I don't think I've ever seen a game jump so readily into story action. For this review, I will do a couple sections of general observations, as well as a pros versus cons analysis in between. This game, while not directly stated as a prequel or based on any specific film, does have very strong ties to the film Mad Max Fury Road. You could possibly classify it as a standalone story, or perhaps a prequel to the film itself. After the initial opening sequence, our protagonist, Max, loses his signature vehicle, the Black-on-Black Interceptor. The game then centers on Max launching a quest to get it back. Poor Max. The poor guy just wants to be left alone, and following a typical formula, a bunch of savages just have to screw him over. It's just not fair. Fortunately, his antagonists usually wind up dead. Unless you're Tina Turner. Spoiler alert. To begin, let's start with the pros. For our first pro, I'm just going to go ahead and let the artist in me speak. The game creators really nailed the atmosphere. As you wander and travel, you truly feel like you're wandering through a desolate and endless wasteland. Even when you turn on the game for the first time, the game's publishing logo gives me a nauseating feeling of thirst and gloom of a dried out apocalypse. I mean, look at it, it's depressing. The video game, in my opinion, is pretty faithful to the source materials and concepts. Former traces of civilization are everywhere, yet mostly abandoned. This leaves players like me to wonder, what happened at the end of the world when it came? At least how we knew it. The main antagonist of the game is a guy named Scrotus, who is named as one of the sons of Mortan Joe. Max meets him pretty quickly in the game, and the War Boys serve as primary adversaries. Most of the game is divided into zones, which are under the influence of Lord Scrotus' forces, and Max completes various quests and actions which wears down Scrotus' power base. Pecking away an enemy's power base? Sounds like my kind of game. Unfortunately, our friend Max isn't much of a conqueror. He's not out to rule. Max is just out to survive. So instead of building an empire, like you would in, say, Grand Theft Auto or The Godfather, you just dismantle the enemy and do little favors for local communities along the way. Once again, sounds pretty familiar in the world of Mad Max. Along the way, Max receives the help from a hunchback mechanic named Chumbucket. He is an odd little character, but he definitely plays a vital role in the story. Chumbucket is the primary builder of the Magnum Opus, which is the primary vehicle in the game, and it has massive customization. Let's face it, Max is good, but for as much punishment as your vehicles will take, you probably will need a godlike mechanic in your corner. Chumbucket will repair your vehicle in the field, which saves my rear multiple times in the game, especially when his skills dramatically improve in the later stages. Despite this, another pro in the game is the overall challenge. This game can be really tough, especially when you least suspect it. Even when Max's stats and strength reach their peak, the player can still get easily overwhelmed if they're not careful. Even when the game enters the sandbox settings, this can still occur. Enemies are aplenty, and appropriate weapons can be scarce. No matter how good one is, it is still incredibly easy to die with a simple slip. This is embarrassing to post on YouTube. But oh well. As he wanders the wasteland, gathering scrap is the primary currency, whether it comes from locations or other vehicles. But Max will also find all sorts of collectibles, whether it be parts for the Magnum Opus or parts for local community projects. But let's not forget survival items like water, gasoline, or food. Yeah, about that food thing, I can deal with the rats. I can deal with the lizards. I can even deal with the dog food. Maggots, on the other hand, well, I guess I don't survive the post-apocalypse. A gaming element that Mad Max hits real well, which is a must for this franchise, is the vehicle combat. For having multiple systems of combat, I am impressed by how well the makers did in the road battles. Easy to switch weapons, easy enough to lock onto targets. If a casual gamer like myself can handle it, I wonder how well a pro could do. The convoy battles are a favorite of mine. In many zones in the game, Scotus's warboys run supply convoys that can be run down and engaged in some pretty epic battles. The purpose is to take out the lead truck. If you take it out, not only will you lower enemy influence in the area, there are some sweet hood ornaments that can be won. Once again, the convoy battles are just challenging enough. There have been many times when I've been run off the road in a convoy chase, just as I was about to take out the lead truck. This is incredibly aggravating, but it's still fun. A little side word of warning. Watch out when trying to puncture some cars from the rear. Some will result in a flamethrowing attack which will unwittingly engulf you. If left untreated, this may prove fatal. Thank you, Chumbucket. As said earlier, the Magnum Opus is highly customizable. Armament can be changed along with engine types, tire, armor, etc. Most of these features will have a bearing on how the car handles. There are various car body types to keep things interesting, and pretty much everything is left at the whim of the player after a certain point in the game. The game also features Archangels, which are essentially prepackaged versions of the Magnum Opus. These are primarily used for various challenges. Max can also be customized to a lesser extent. There are a fair amount of cosmetic changes you can make, but unfortunately certain gear statistically should remain equipped once acquired for the duration of the game. This takes a little fun out of the customization, but it isn't bad enough to the point where I would call it a true con. Going back to car weapons, Max can use his shotgun, but it's a little hard to aim, and there are some obvious ramming attacks that the car can use. However, there's also a sniper rifle that comes in handy when making an approach to an enemy camp. It takes a little practice, but using this thing makes invading some bases much easier. It just takes a little patience. The Thundersphere weapon is actually immensely powerful. These are incredibly accurate, and they will take out most vehicles and even some structures out in a single blast. These spears also come in handy for making free-falling torsos. Man, this game is dark. And perhaps I have a little too much fun doing this. I'm really wondering why these are in here. Oh, that's right, they're in the movie. Finally, the regular spear gun, on the other hand, it's just plain broken. It is stupid accurate and can instantly kill any human it stabs. I will sometimes drive right up to the front door of an enemy base and take out as many as 11 guys using just the spear gun. It is literally almost an easy button. It is also fun for pulling down sniper towers, prying open gates, and taking down Scarecrows. We'll get to the Scarecrow thing in a second. But I mean, you can take this spear gun and just pull around a body for miles. Again, this is a dark game. Yeah, going back to those Scarecrow things for a second. Yes, Scarecrows. In every zone of the game, just about, the area is littered with these little outposts called Scarecrows, which are essentially human bodies strung up together which I guess serve as a warning to outsiders or maybe a demonstration of Scrotus's power. These can be pulled down with the use of the spear, or you can do it with a ramming attack. But the nice thing is these are fairly easy to destroy and a good way to lower the influence. And lowering the influence will gradually decrease the power of the enemy, which means you're less likely to have random attacks. For every zone you get into, there tends to be a repeated pattern. One thing that you want to do right away is get to these hot air balloon things, which you can use to identify the local camps, enemy structures, scarecrows, or other points of interest within a particular zone. When you first arrive in the zone, it will usually appear as red on the map, but as you destroy Scrotus's infrastructure throughout the course of your journeys within the zone, it'll gradually turn lighter and eventually white. Once you take care of all of the relevant missions and destruction tasks, they officially will no longer have a presence in the area, and travel is much safer. The map interface is actually a very good bright point in the game. It allows you to link up various points of interest and will even create a trail on your mini-map. This prevents you from getting too lost during the course of the game. Another nice feature is as you visit various points of interest, fast travel options will be unlocked. This saves a ton of time throughout the course of Mad Max. The in-game menu contains an encyclopedia of information. This will contain information about the various cars you'll encounter, potential enemies you might see, biographical information, various characters, as well as items that you may have collected. Percentages are also measured, so you can waste a good half an hour just going through this information and numbers. This kind of thing I never really see as a gripe, and I always consider it a plus. The three main types of enemy factions you'll encounter are the Warboys, the Scavengers, and the Creepy Buzzards. Well, I at least call them creepy. Each faction seems to contain a matching role within its group though. For instance, a Warboy that has one enemy type will have a corresponding matching enemy type in the Buzzard faction. This gets a little cookie cutter, but it's still not a true gripe. A final note, going back to the atmosphere. One thing that is really cool looking are the Sandstorms that come along in the game. These come completely at random at times, so you never really see them coming until it's already coming towards you. As you can see graphically, it is quite a force to be reckoned with, and once it hits, it's best to find shelter as soon as possible, because even at max health, they can kill you. I just have to throw this in there. The landmarks. Like this headless statue out in the middle of the wasteland. It's called the Colossus, which I guess was supposed to be a beacon of hope for some reason. And now it's just a headless statue that's just simply there. Really makes me wonder what the story is. Then there's this area called the Dunes. It's a very large area, as large as any zone in the game. However, it's not nearly as pronounced as most of the other zones in the game. But in this particular area, as you drive closer and closer, you realize that you're driving towards an old airport. You can see light posts stick out of the ground, as well as some street signs, some banners, and then finally you get to the terminal itself. It's a very dark place, and not an area that I'm particularly fond of because it's infested with those creepy buzzards. The buzzards creep me out, and it's actually a pretty long zone under there, but it's still a very nice add to the game. In some ways, I just feel like I can't give the game enough credit for the nice presentation, masterful presentation of a post-apocalyptic world. Even the load screens that you see here have all kinds of hints of the former civilization. And I really wish I had time to go into greater detail to the point where it wouldn't be boring. But now that we've talked about the pros, let's go ahead and get to the cons. The first major gripe I have with the game is that the characters, with the exception of Max himself, and he doesn't speak all that much, and Chumbucket, all the other characters in the game are just so incredibly flat. I don't care about their story or back history. And this kind of goes for the various tribal leaders that you'll encounter who are quote-unquote somewhat the good guys. But the bosses, the game makers just got lazy. How many bosses here are the exact same? You can see these photos here, and it's incredibly exciting. These make up a good chunk of the bosses of the game, and I'm telling you right now, they practically all play the same way. Big missed opportunity, and a big disappointment. Speaking of characters, there's this fellow by the name of Griffin that wanders around. You can always kind of tell who he is by this big old backpack he's got on his back. And he'll usually engage in these morality conversations with Max. Talk a little backstory, philosophical stuff that I find relatively uninteresting. You do have to meet up with him at some point though, because he is responsible for upgrading your character, but he's by no means a favorite of mine in the game. Like most game magazines or reviews will tell you, they'll probably tell you that the gameplay is repetitive, and it is, but it particularly gets bad after the game is beaten and it goes into a sandbox mode. Sorry for that little spoiler, but I don't think it would really ruin anything for you. But once you beat the game and once you clear out most of the enemies, you go into sandbox mode, which means you can pretty much do whatever you want. But it's pretty much the equivalent of a can of Pepsi that you have to open all night. Very flat, unexciting, and you don't want to drink it. Since we're on the subject of game clearing, yeah, I am that guy that'll clear as much of the game as humanly possible. I try to find all the nooks and crannies, but in this game it does get very, very tedious. Some of these camps that you have to clear all the scrap available as well. Some of the stuff is so well hidden that I had to whip out my cell phone to clear. Not fun at all. Even though I like to clear a game, and this is the same gripe I had with Batman Arkham Knight, is I hate precision driving. There's a reason why I don't play racers, and there's a lot of challenges within this game that require precision driving. Races. I suck at races. I always have, I always will. I can live without it. This is my personal gripe. I wouldn't hold it against other players if you like this thing, but this is an area of the game I can really do without. The biggest con in terms of game completion is probably landmine removal. You can lower Scrotus' influence by destroying the Scarecrows, destroying the refineries, enemy base camps, convoys. All of that is relatively fun. Then there's the landmine removal. You have to take out a special car with a special dog, let the dog sniff out the landmine, and disarm the landmines. 2 minefields per zone. Takes forever. You don't have the Magnum Opus to back you up, so you don't have its weapons. It's just not fun. As a matter of fact, it's such not a fun time that I refuse to post a video of it. The Magnum Opus, since we're on that subject, is a cool car. It's fun to play with, it's fun to customize. But it's too good. The problem is, none of the other vehicles in the entire game, not even the black on black, compares to the Magnum Opus. So why use another car? Ever. Unless you have to. That was one thing in the game that was just so out of balance that I wish they would have done a little bit more to provide more balance to the various vehicles. And finally, my biggest gripe. This contains a spoiler. If you have a problem with that, and specific to this game, feel free to turn off the video now. Still there? Okay, my biggest gripe. There is no appearance of a Mortan Joe at any time within the game. His name is mentioned, I believe, maybe once. But as we're going towards Gastown, which is also prominently mentioned in Fury Road, there's no Mortan Joe. Very disappointing. But it might have been a copyright thing, so I don't know if it was avoidable or not. It just made me really sad. So let's get to the verdict. Is this a good game? Was I happy with my purchase? I'm a fan of the Magnum series. Therefore, I like the game, because it was executed close enough and faithful enough to the point where I felt it was fun. Combat was very well blended for the vehicle combat. Even if the game got a little repetitive, I can forgive this. Fans of the Mad Max series will probably appreciate the game. If you're not a fan of the Mad Max series and never heard of it, it may not be the most exciting thing that you've ever picked up. It's not a bad game, but probably 7-point scale, or 7 points on a 10-point scale. So C+. I'm glad I have it. No regrets. That's just my take. Thanks for watching. And I am actively trying to grow the channel, so feel free to check out my other videos as you see fit. Like and subscribe if you see something you like. In the meantime, this is Mad Marty, reminding you to do what's responsible, avoid what's irresponsible, make the most of what you got, and get respect. Mad respect. See you next time.